Welcome to all the new subscribers, and a huge thank you to anyone who is returning. My name is Marian Guevara, and today I'll be filming a video that is part of a series that I really like to keep up with, and that is my book and movie discussion series. So for those who don't know, this is basically a video where I discuss a novel and then compare it with its subsequent film adaptation. And today I will be discussing Henry James's Washington Square and the 1949 film The Heiress. Now I'll be going in depth for both the book and the film, so as it's part and parcel when it comes to these videos, there will be heavy spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers, if you want to check out the book or the film for yourself, I highly recommend that you either read or watch and then come back to this video. So as I mentioned, Washington Square was written by Henry James and was published in 1880. And it's a pretty relatively simple plot in which we're following a young woman named Catherine Sloper living in, I would say, would be the first half, mid-19th century. And she's living with her father, Dr. Austin Sloper, and her Aunt Lavinia in a house in Washington Square, New York. And Catherine is a very plain, introverted, shy young woman. Things change when a young man starts showing romantic interest in her, which is the first that has ever happened to Catherine. And her father, Dr. Sloper, suspects that he happens to be a fortune hunter because Catherine is an heiress. She is set to inherit a large sum of money. And so poor Catherine basically ends up sort of being torn between idolizing her father, revering her father, like respecting her father's wishes, but then reciprocating this romantic love, like the first romantic love that she's ever come across. What I really enjoyed about Washington Square was just how introspective it was. It's definitely one that is more psychological, in fact. A lot of the intrigue that comes from this book is just seeing how different characters are like scheming, their machinations basically. How we see Morris Townsend sort of conspire or work with Lavinia to see how he can possibly marry Catherine and get on the good side of Austin Sloper, and then Dr. Sloper convening with his sisters, trying to ascertain or sort of get proof that Morris Townsend is, a fortune hunter. There's a lot of scheming, a lot of going behind the backs of people and trying to figure out motives and trying to figure out a way to turn events into one's favor. While you have these three characters trying to 4D chess one another, in the middle of all of it is Catherine Sloper, who, as I mentioned before, is described as plain, painfully shy, and very much an introvert. And the thing is, because Catherine is very quiet, they kind of mistake her for being simple, not bright. But in reality, Catherine is just very to the point. I know that Washington Square is not going to appeal to everyone. I know for a fact that some people prefer the film because the film is a bit more direct. While Washington Square, because it's a novel and because it's Henry James, it tends to be more ambiguous and a bit more subtle. And I think I really like it for that. I love how it's introspective. I love how it kind of delves into the psychology of a lot of these characters, seeing their personalities, their way of thinking, and how it affects the way they maneuver amongst themselves. So yeah, Washington Square was a winner for me, at least. It's like a 4-star read and the best Henry James novel that I have read so far. Now moving on to William Wyler's The Heiress, which I really enjoyed, especially for the principal performances. Olivia de Havilland was my favorite part of this film. She was great. I think she captured her plainness, her awkwardness in, social interactions. Olivia kind of gives a bit more spirited Catherine who can joke around and, quip as well. So yeah, Olivia de Havilland did a great job of portraying, the shy, plain Catherine. But there's a point in the film, and people will know if they see it, where she kind of just flips, she switches, and she nails it. I also really like Ralph Richardson, who plays the father. I think he does a good job of portraying that congeniality of Dr. Sloper when he's, amongst people, but then also his condescending manner. Montgomery Clift plays Morris Townsend, and I'm not gonna lie, whenever I think of Morris Townsend, I'm gonna picture Montgomery Clift because I think, physically he matched the description: slim, young, beautiful, and I think he did a pretty good job. Although I do prefer like Olivia and Ralph Richardson's, performances. He did a fairly good job as Morris Townsend. Miriam Hopkins plays Aunt Lavinia, and she was fun. She sort of gave the film a bit of levity. In the book and in the film, she relishes in like the romance between Morris and Catherine. In the book, it's much more extreme, I'd say, to a point where she's just an active nuisance. So yes, it's these performances that really make the Heiress. Everyone working in tandem together to put on just a good drama. So of course, when I discuss the film, I also talk about the major differences between it and the book. And for the Heiress, I feel like the major differences happen towards the latter end of the film. And it boils down to the fact that the movie gives a heightened sense of cruelty in the interactions Catherine has with her father and with Morris. And then this heightened sense of cruelty has a corresponding effect on Catherine's personality towards the end. Now, in the book and in the film, Catherine and her father, there's a rift that comes between them. So in the beginning of the story, Catherine sort of idolizes her father. She reveres him. However, she loves Morris and she's set on marrying him, and her father finds that displeasing. She explains that, I can't in good conscience live under your roof or accept your hospitality if I'm acting not in accordance with your will or your wishes. So therefore, I'm gonna marry Morris and be with him. And she says this in good faith. She says this to appeal to his honor. It's a very sound logic. And her father dismisses her. Actually, in the book, he actually respects it. But then in a second, he becomes annoyed with her and dismisses her and claims that, you're just acting impertinent. And Catherine is shocked and upset that this good nature appeal to his honor is treated in such a manner, and she becomes disillusioned with him. Now, in the film, he basically insults her. He tells her that, there's nothing to you that could appeal to any man other than your wealth. There's nothing to you at all. You're plain, you're simple, you're stupid. Yeah, basically insults her right to her face. And that's the rift. That's what causes the rift. With Catherine's interaction with Morris, it is more subtle in the book, similar to the way that her interaction with her father was. Now, in the novel, upon learning that her father is still unrelenting, will still not acquiesce to their union, and that he will probably just disinherit Catherine should she marry him, Morris Townsend basically comes to the conclusion that he's going to have to give up Catherine. Now, James leaves his true motives ambiguous. I think, personally for me, it just comes off that, Morris was very much interested in her fortune, but that he still had some bit of affection for her. He did not want her to be hurt. He ends up postponing their engagement or postponing their marriage, and Catherine sort of starts to suspect that he will break off the marriage. And, he has found a job. He ends up leaving for the job to another state, and he sends her a letter, basically breaking off the marriage, and Catherine is left heartbroken. Now, what he does in the book is pretty callous, but then what happens in the film is cruel. He basically agrees with Catherine, on her plan to elope. He says that he's going to meet her at the house at 12:30, and he doesn't show up. He basically jilts her. And then we find out that he went to California and never contacted Catherine, never explaining his reasoning. Now, the last major difference is how Catherine decides to move forward after being hurt by her father and by Morris Townsend. And then I believe this quote from the book kind of explains it. So, from her own point of view, the great facts of her career were that Morris Townsend had trifled with her affection and that her father had broken its spring. Nothing could ever alter these facts. They were always there, like her name, her age, her plain face. Nothing could ever undo the wrong or cure the pain that Morris had inflicted on her, and nothing could ever make her feel towards her father as she felt in her younger years. There was something dead in her life, and her duty was to try and fill the void. Catherine recognized this duty to the utmost. She had a great disapproval of brooding and moping. So yes, Catherine is hurt by what Morris and her father did to her. However, her reaction to it is sort of to grow up, to move on, trying to find little happinesses that can sort of detract away from the initial pain, from the pain of what they've done to her. And we find out in the book that she grows up to become this sort of like community spinster that, young people go to. And while though she may not be happy, she has found a sense of contentment. Now, in the film, because Morris and her father, their actions to her were a lot crueler, I feel like her reaction is the same, in like. There's a famous line in the film where Aunt Lavinia says, how can you be so cruel? And Catherine says, oh yes, I can be cruel. I've been taught by masters. In the book, several years pass after the incident with Morris when Dr. Sloper begins to die. And he becomes suspicious of Catherine. She never threw a fit, like a passionate fit, over losing Morris. And she declined 2 marriage proposals over the years. And he suspects that the reason why this is happening is because Morris is waiting in the wings, waiting for him to die so that him and Catherine can get married and get all his money. So Dr. Sloper asks Catherine, he basically says, promise me that when I die, you won't marry Morris Townsend. And if you don't, I'm not going to give you your inheritance. And Catherine basically says, no, I'm not going to make that promise. And it's not because she has hope that, that Morris will be back and they'll live happily ever after. We find out that she does this as an act of defiance. In the film, there is still this act of defiance, but it's a lot more colder. Dr. Sloper is on his deathbed and he's calling for Catherine, and she basically refuses. She says to the servant, it's too late. And yeah, Catherine basically does not say goodbye to her father. And that's how serious the rift between the two of them is. And then, of course, you have her interaction with Morris, which also happens in the book. So in the book, Morris shows up back, it's been years. He's now 45 years old. He's changed a bit, and he wants to sort of rekindle, the friendship. And I think hopefully for him, he wants to kind of rekindle their romance. But Catherine receives him with, once again, a sense of disillusionment and finality. And she's quite firm, basically saying, you've hurt me. There's no moving forward. It has affected my life in such a great degree. We can't be anything. And she just dismisses him. In the film, she basically tricks him into thinking, oh yes, I've forgiven you and let's elope. And when Morris shows up, she basically has him locked out of the house and leaves him behind. So yeah, a lot more vindictive compared to sort of like the book. But that's understandable because the film does change those initial interactions she has with her father and Morris, making it more cruel. I do see a lot of debate about whether the ending of The Heiress, is it tragic? Is it empowering? For me, I believe it's a mixture of both. I do feel that Catherine is now, she's no longer under like the emotional thumb of her father. She's no longer under the emotional will of, Morris. She has learned to sort of exercise her own will and not be so scared, not be so shy anymore. However, I do feel that there is a sense of coldness, of distrustfulness and cruelty that is now in her character. It's not all cut and dry when it comes to the adaptation as well. So yeah, both of these really interesting stories, both of them still lend to a lot of discussion and interpretation. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this book and movie discussion. Please let me know if you've read the book or if you watched the film. What are your thoughts on either of them? Leave it down in the comment below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!